Can everyone hear me? Excellent. We're going to do a quicker update today since it's the 4th of July. Happy 4th of July to anyone in the US of A today. But I think a lot of people are out doing something else. All right, 2 o'clock. Let's get started. Can everyone see my screen? All right, perfect. So record to the cloud here. All right, crypto market update, folks. Happy 4th of July to any of our friends out in the United States. We're going to do a quicker update today, predominantly because it's the 4th of July and I'm also traveling. Bear with me, I'm on my travel computer, so should work fine. But also, it's 35 degrees out, so I have a fan running. You might hear some background noise on that fan, but it's so boiling hot that has to stay on. How's the sound? Is that good for everyone? All right, cool. So Bitcoin. Let's look at Bitcoin. Let's start with Bitcoin. We obviously had that parabolic move up. I'm just going to minimize the chat here, move the chat over. All right. Had a nice correction, about a 30% correction. So that's definitely, like, it had a nice bounce up to 30%. Didn't quite hit the orders that I had my orders closer to the 8,500 zone, slightly below 9K. Doesn't mean that we're not going to get there. Obviously, as you can see, there's every time the market gets dumped, there's multiple little bounces on the way down. Not to say that we can't continue to go up, but you know, this did bounce right up into the 0.618 zone. There is a possibility that it does roll over, right? So the most bullish case scenario for Bitcoin would be if it were to consolidate and do some sideways, kind of chop around for a few weeks or not. That would be fairly good for the trend. And then if it did break out of the current high, it would be more sustainable. If it broke out of the current high sooner than later without more consolidation, then it kind of ends up looking like just another push upwards on the parabolic blow off top. So one has to exercise caution, right? Because we all know that it turns into a game of hot potato. Unless, of course, this market just wants to decide to break out of the all-time highs. But I'm leaning more towards the 2015 parabola, even though we've gone up 3 fib levels instead of 2 fib levels. So I still have my orders down where I have them set down here. You know, it might not go down that low, and that's fine. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with not having to buy a dip. But if it does make it down to that level, then I definitely see like a much higher probability of that being a really, really great dip buy, predominantly because it also gets down into more, like this did tag some resistance here, it hit this resistance area right here. But, you know, the Bitcoin market, when it bleeds out a bit, when it does have its correction, especially when the market went parabolic, it could have a deeper correction. You know, I'm just leaning towards deeper correction. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen, but that's what I'm leaning towards. So I'd rather wait for a deeper correction and not catch the dip than catch it too early above 10K area. It kind of tagged down to the 9,600 zone. So it did dip below 10K. So that's obviously a better zone to buy than anything above 10K. But then you got to also think of the risk to reward on, you know, Bitcoin, unless it's going to tag a test towards the all-time highs or something like that. what's the risk to reward from buying up here, right? That's what I'm thinking. So going back to 2015, talked about the multiple parabolic moves, and we talked about how this was only 2 fib levels up, and that the current parabolic advance came right up to this zone. So it actually was 4 fib levels up that it moved. And if we were to compare that to the current market structure, up here, right? But this is the exact reason why I always talk about doing the heavy lifting in the gutter, right? When it's the least pleasant, right? The least pleasant. Everyone's bullish on Bitcoin now. Everyone, right? And we're in a bull trend. We're in a confirmed bull trend. But isn't it fascinating how a lot of people are interested in buying Bitcoin again over $10,000 when it was only 3K, right? Several months ago. So that's like mass psychology. You know, at 3K, no one wanted it. 12K, everyone wants it. Well, we know that people who didn't want it at 3K were wrong. So people buying at the 12K region, are they right in buying that right now? 300% markup. So I tend to lean towards the bigger dips or catching action somewhere else in another market, possibly, just because the risk reward is limited. But so we'll see. I mean, I'm leaning towards this consolidating and cooling off. I'd say the best case scenario, what I would like to see, would be like an ascending triangle type scenario. So probably like, if we could consolidate into something like this, into the fall or some, right? That's what I would like to see. Massive consolidation pattern would be really, really good, because then if it created an ascending triangle, broke out of the ascending triangle, it wouldn't take too long to hit the all-time high. You're looking at probably 30% or whatever, 41% to the all-time high. If it does that after an ascending triangle, then the probability of an all-time high breakout into a new all-time high cycle and trend is a lot higher, right? So, or a lot more sustainable. Then you get into like a nice multi-year bull trend, versus if it just keeps shooting up parabolic, going up vertical. Well, maybe at that point, if it broke out, it would tag, the 30K region and then have a deeper pullback. And then who knows, there might have to be some bearishness to contend with at that point, right? So anyways, that's my thoughts on Bitcoin. I'm personally, so again, don't base any of your trades based off what I'm doing. I'm not super eager to buy Bitcoin right now. I'm not super eager and keen, just because obviously the prices, right? But that's also coming from a place of being satisfied with what I have right now. Whereas starting off, then maybe you want to get some more Bitcoin. Ultimately, though, getting the cost basis down as low as possible is really where it's at, right? And so just above this zone is a lot riskier. But a deeper pullback to that area, and then suddenly a dip by screams. But we had a really good bounce off of this. Let's see if I can pull this up. You can see that buyer stepped in fairly quickly on this bounce as a tag down on the first 30%. So kind of in a bit of a wait and see pattern with this. But all right, so let's go to Tezos. Tezos to start having a bit of a recovery. Is generally what I am just kind of riding out the long game right now. We'll talk about the news as well. Actually, I guess I could just dive right into the news, and we're going to talk a bit about market sentiment. So, isn't it funny how quickly market sentiment can shift in crypto, right? I'll give you a couple of examples of just really silly examples of how stupid people can be sometimes when it comes to markets. So, a few weeks or last week, Tezos was dying. Tezos was dropping to new lows. Everyone's angry. You look on Reddit. Everyone's angry at the Tezos Foundation. Oh, how come you're not getting paying for listings on exchanges and all this stuff, right? Just a lot of complaining, blaming, stuff like that. There was an interesting article I read that a lawyer wrote. Whereas if they want to try to stay as a non-security, then they can't be going out paying for exchange listings, right? That sort of activity has to be more driven by the community and not specifically the foundation, right? But so there's another group, I think Tezos Commons Foundation is just a separate group that people create. I think they're working on exchange listings. And so KuCoin, everyone was doing backflips over it getting added to KuCoin, which is great. Like I'd like to see it on as many exchanges as possible. So the more exchanges it gets added onto, the better, right? But I mean, the liquidity here is a joke, right? So obviously getting listed to the exchange didn't really do anything for the liquidity. And if you look at the current volume, the majority of the volume here, it's most of it is just coming from the exchanges that it's already been on. So we've been seeing quite an increase in the volume, 14 million. It's kind of double what it was before this news broke. Now, what was interesting is I saw the volume picking up, a couple days ago before the news even broke, and the price is going up. The volume was increasing, and I thought that's interesting. Everything's kind of a little bit in the red, and suddenly Tezos is up and the volume's increasing. I thought, I wonder if there's something that we don't know that someone else knows right now that they're buying. Obviously, there's some people that have that information before others, right? And then sure enough, yesterday, after Tezos increased 27% already, that suddenly they dropped this announcement, right? So this is just obviously more ecosystem growth that I'm talking about. This is exactly the type of ecosystem growth that I have been talking about when you invest in a newer project, a newer network. If it's a big enough project, well-capitalized project, innovative enough project, then suddenly other large players are going to want to get involved and use that. So I don't know these banks as investment bank, but apparently BTG is the third largest investment bank in South America, right? And then I think Dalma Capital's from Dubai, but they're going to be doing STOs on Tezos, right? BTG, someone's saying it's a big bank in Brazil. They're going to be doing STOs on Tezos. I think something around real estate. I think one of the Tezos developers is kind of helping them out so we kind of saw this with Ethereum. We saw this with Ethereum Enterprise in 2016, where you had interest from bigger players like Goldman Sachs, so on and so forth. So this is all good. Then there's that other deal coming out in Asia where they want to create $1 billion worth of real estate commodities on Tezos. So we're seeing network growth. We're seeing network interest, which is going to make it more of a competitive player. And then eventually the bullish fundamental news starts to catch up. But if we were to look at it based on market sentiment and price and where people were at just a few weeks ago, suddenly it was dead. No one wanted it. They were all scared. And then some bullish news and the tides shift so quickly and suddenly everyone loves it again. So, my philosophy is if I have an investment thesis about something and I think that it's solid and I have a general plan around it that I'm going to stay the course, I'm going to stick with it. Obviously, there's room for adaptation. Obviously, one can be wrong and perhaps need to adapt to manage risk and survive at the game. But if nothing major has changed with the project on a fundamental level, like especially on as far as like the the technology, right? That's the most important element, one of the most important elements. Then it's important to be able to separate just fear, uncertainty, and doubt, FUD, around maybe conflicts or whatever, like superficial bad news, versus some major fundamental news, like something happening to the protocol. So for example, that little rift that they had with some OCaml Pro developers and parting of ways, and them creating their own altcoin, that's just kind of superficial. In my opinion, that's just superficial fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It doesn't necessarily change the network at the core level or change the fundamentals. An example of something that would be very detrimental on a fundamental level is if Tezos was voting for a protocol upgrade and then something went horribly wrong in the upgrade and the entire network froze down and some kind of glitch or bug or something like that, right? We saw major things like that, like apparently in Ethereum, I think it was like 2017 or whatever, there was a bug. There was a bug in one of the, I think it was like the Parity clients. They have different clients, different wallets for the network, different types of nodes. And there's a bug that basically like glitched or was like they deleted access to all the multi-signature wallets somehow, and no one could access. Like, so millions of dollars got frozen on the blockchain, right? So that would be something on like something seriously flawed on a fundamental level, right? That could cause one to reassess or pause. Okay, so I got some info. Someone saying, just to be more clear, BTG is the 7th biggest bank in Brazil. So that's fairly good. So that's just more liquidity. Obviously, these banks and such have access to a lot more liquidity. Probably, who knows, maybe if they're using the network, it would make sense that they would want to invest in it. Suddenly now it's starting to, I believe it's going to be getting a lot more people's radar, right? And as this thing continues, I'll just keep it getting listed on more exchanges. There'll be more and more projects that are built on it, and we'll just keep seeing these we might not know what the news events are going to be, but I anticipate we'll keep seeing them trickle in, which does kind of make it fun being an early adopter on ground zero, right? So that's Tezos. I'm not selling until it goes up a lot higher. I had like 10 as my initial target. I would even consider somewhere around 5-ish area too, perhaps for some initial profit taking. Like if I ever shot up here, I'd probably take just a bit off the table or some managed risk. So that's like a 10x multiple from the ICO price. That'd certainly be enough profit on the table to make it interesting to skim a little bit while keeping the majority of the position. So in my opinion, like that would be skimming some profit off the table for something like Tezos. I think how that would work best would be to perhaps calculate what 7% returns would be on my entire Tezos stash as it's staking, and then sell basically what I bake for the year type of thing, right? So there's a couple approaches. That's one approach. That's the risk management approach. You pay yourself. It's generated some passive income. You pay yourself. You lock that money in. The other approach is obviously if you think it's going to go up higher, then by keeping it, it's just kind of compounding itself, right? Because every single time you get rewards, that gets added to your total, and then it compounds itself, right? So it just keeps kind of increasing in that regard. So that's Tezos. That's what I have to say about that. Otherwise, not a ton has changed, in my opinion. I think that's certainly lightened up the mood a bit, so that's good. But again, this is weekends getting shaken out, and then other people, one person's loss is another person's opportunity, is another person's debt, right? So I'm sure there are some people waiting for that dip or waiting for a bigger dip to be able to buy in or load up. And sometimes in crypto, people will purposely fight or create drama just so that they can fill their own bags, right? So that's something to consider. So it's just important to kind of identify superficial, surface level FUD versus more deeper stuff that impacts fundamentals. All right, so looking at, it's kind of a bit of a mixed bag here. I'm just gonna pop this on the BTC chart to see if still a lot of coins are still kind of bleeding out a little bit against Bitcoin on the BTC charts. There's a few that have been gaining a bit on the BTC charts. So far, most of them have continued to lose on the BTC charts. So I'll look at Holochain, HOT. Let's see. I'll look at Doge. 15 Satoshi, so it did kind of like a full retrace down into this lower level. And that probably wouldn't be surprised if that lined up with closer to 6.618, closer to 0.78 on the BTC charts. It's a bit of a bounce off this area. USDT wise, it's kind of chopping around. I'd say if I wanted a bag of this, then this probably wouldn't be a terrible area because there's a clear line in the sand to be able to cut it. Obviously, if it were to break this support and bleed out, then that wouldn't be too. That would probably end up doing a full retrace down into the lower level. So it's important that this area kind of holds up. So far, we kind of showing a bit of a V bottom, just as we did here, but this was preceded by a lower low on the BTC charts. So Bitcoin's still very much in control of the game. One possibility that I've been waiting for and entertaining would be the possibility of altcoins starting to make gains in momentum as BTC consolidates at the higher levels, right? This is why I actually think a 6-month ascending triangle or something like that, or at least a multi-month, maybe like 3 months or so, would actually be, in my opinion, I think would be very bullish for alts, because when Bitcoin stabilizes and it's not breaking new highs or having massive dumps and corrections, when it just stabilizes and consolidates and the markets get kind of bored, oftentimes liquidity traders, investors, they'll hunt for opportunities elsewhere. They'll look for something else that's a little less boring. One example, I'm just going to go back and show you some quick back testing here. One sec. So this is kind of freezing up a bit. All right. So I'm on my my travel computer. So usually I have like multiple screens, so I can have the chat in one screen and the charts on the other and such. And so now I'm just kind of like managing multiple tabs on a small screen. So bear with me. Okay. All right. Oh yes, this is what I was gonna. So in 2016, this big ascending triangle here, do comparison to Ethereum. So Ethereum was the bull market of the year of 2016. That was the biggest market, the biggest move. Let's see if they have Poloniex. Okay, we'll see what Bittrex is doing. So you can kind of, so this is, Ethereum. One second. It's overlaps with Bitcoin, the price. So let me just see what matches up. So this is the first run. I think this is the first run up. The second run. I'm just going to go straight to the Ethereum chart just to look at that. Just to kind of look at when that trend started on Poloniex. Look at the BTC chart and then the USDT chart. So this whole May consolidation, okay, so yeah, this was the run up on the BTC charts. So you can kind of see the beginning while Bitcoin was consolidating. So there's this inverse correlation because Bitcoin was kind of crashing, right? And so there's a bit of an inverse correlation here. And then on the USDT charts, what that looked like was just breaking out at a lower accumulation range, ramping up, right? This is like Ethereum's first market cycle right here. And so the interesting part about this is that Bitcoin was consolidating in a large ascending triangle. Right? And then there's another level where broke out. So this does the parabola, the end of 2015. You could kind of see it was kind of tracking it. It bounced off of that parabolic run. It was probably losing against Bitcoin a bit. This is a USDT chart. And then there was just this sideways flat consolidation here when Bitcoin was extremely boring. Anyone who was trading at the time, there were months where it was just kind of chopping around sideways. So because of that, it basically gave the spotlight to something else, right? And Ethereum was the market of the year. That was the play of the year, the most exciting market that year. So that happened during that consolidation. So obviously, if we can get some consolidation, if we can get a boring Bitcoin market, then that's what I think altcoins need to see. Otherwise, we'll just kind of continue with a little bit more of the same old, same old. All right. Do another comparison. BTC. And so the most boring period, so this is interesting. So right here is the most boring period of consolidation on Bitcoin, right? And right here is when Ethereum started to go nuts, right? When it was peaking out, going parabolic on the BTC charts, was when Bitcoin was boring, right? So this would be a very bullish scenario for altcoins if we can get some consolidation. I'm not in the camp where I want to see Bitcoin breaking the all-time highs this year or anything like that. A lot of moon kids are chanting on social media for that to happen, but I would rather see some consolidation so the Bitcoin trend stays healthy, and then to shift some energy and focus into some other markets. So see if that happens. Cut that out. All right. Close that. Litecoin halving coming up. Let's look at LTC. I think LTC is the big winner for this year thus far. (553% this year. It's consolidating. BTC charts had a big sell-off. You could kind of see it tagged this lower area of resistance. I find the alt BTC charts are always a lot uglier and choppier, right? Predominantly now because the majority of trading and liquidity has been shifting more into the fiat markets. And I think that's changed the game a lot than the markets, how they used to be in 2016, 2015, where there wasn't that many fiat markets to trade. And so the majority of action was happening on the BTC charts. Let's see, anything else sticks out? I'll look at, let's look at Zcash. It's kind of chopping around at the lower levels here on the BTC charts. Not terribly exciting price action. Altcoins have kind of been getting hammered a bit against the BTC charts for a good chunk of the year, Zcash especially. So what I need to see for Zcash in order for this trend to pick up momentum is to break. Right now you have this prior support area that turned into resistance. What this market needs to do is break out above this area and then perhaps retest it, produce a higher low, and start to trend. So it's very much at the lower end of the spectrum. And when it trends on the BTC charts and goes parabolic, that it's a full-blown alt season. So we still got some chopping around to do. A lot of people still hating alts for obvious reasons. Now people, the narrative is that people are extremely convinced on social media that there will never be an alt season again, which it's not a bad thing for market sentiment to say those things. So, and we're seeing a lot more projects dying, right? Like I mentioned before, probably 90% of altcoin crypto projects die. There's a lot of garbage that needs to be washed up. It needs to be purged and cleansed out of the markets, right? Survival of the fittest for these markets. There's a lot of them that just need to die, and that will continue to get delisted. It seems like exchange delistings are the biggest death of all coins right now, right? Liquidity. And it seems like the majority of coins that are being targeted are ERC20 tokens on dApps. A lot of them for products or services that don't even exist, right? So just kind of IOUs. Any particular markets that you folks want to look at? Maybe I'll look at five tickers. Do Q&A on 5 tickers. What's actually driving these delistings? That's a good question. I think it's regulations. I really do. I think that, the US exchanges, for example, are concerned about regulatory pressure. They don't want to necessarily be trading things that are considered unregistered securities, right? Oh yeah, Doge. I'm going to look at that one. So we've been seeing a lot of the delistings on Bittrex and Poloniex. Those were their reasons, predominantly Bittrex and Poloniex, because they're in the US. Binance, I think, just kind of delists probably based on liquidity and cleaning up house. So there is liquidity is another reason. If something's not trading enough volume, if it's just kind of a dying market, then it's not really a money maker for them. It becomes too much hassles. They want to add new projects, then they just clean up shop and get rid of some other ones. What do you think of the impact for the new FATF regulations? Well, I know the G8 are talking about adopting them. I don't know all the full details about those regulations. I read something that they wanted to link IDs to transactions on the blockchain, which I think it will get us pretty heavy pushback from the crypto industry. I don't know how viable that would be, nor would that be really desirable, safe, or secure, right, from individuals using it, because privacy and security kind of go hand in hand when it comes to crypto and just stuff in general, right? They don't necessarily care so much about people's privacy, it seems, but I don't know. I'm not going to make anything of it. I'm going to do some more research into that. I think right now they're going to target the exchanges first and foremost. That's what they can regulate. That's the on-ramps. It's like almost impossible for them to try to regulate the actual networks. And I just think it's a testament that we need truly decentralized exchanges without any third parties. There's a lot of decentralized exchanges out there that aren't actually really fully decentralized. A lot of, I'll give you an example. Binance calls their exchange a DEX, short for decentralized exchange. And they blacklisted, I think, certain sanctioned countries or whatnot from trading on there because of regulations, right? So that's not really a DEX, right? That's decentralized. It has the marketing of something that's decentralized, but something truly decentralized that's the whole nature of permissionless money. If it's permissioned, then you're like, okay, well, if you're from this place, you can't do business, we have to block your IP or whatever, then that's permission money, right? That's not permissionless, therefore it's not, in my books, decentralized, right? So, or at least not as decentralized. So gonna look up some tickers. We're gonna start with Doge just because that's currently a coin of interest for me right now. So you can kind of see dip down towards the 26 Satoshi range, possibility of a higher low here. Can chop around for a while at the bottom, as we've seen before. right here. This actually kind of chopped around for a few months. So you're looking at almost pretty much 3 months where just consolidated near the bottom. So the whole Doge play isn't necessarily something that is going to, could be a faster move, but sometimes it can also do one of these as well, right? And just kind of go in this bear channel. You can kind of see there's this very long bear channel here on Doge. And then when it broke out of that bear channel, it was a clear signal, clear buy signal, because it was pretty much almost lasted an entire year. Not pretty much, it did last the entire year, this bear channel. So when you have something, the longer the price pattern, the bigger the breakout, in my opinion, as far as the momentum and stuff like that. This was just a little bit more sideways. And so it's definitely in an ideal buy zone, but I'm not holding my breath. I'm testing the waters with my last buy. Where I'm going to buy a lot heavier is if we can drop below 25 satoshis, below 22, anything like 15 to 22 satoshis, I think would be a steal. And I would go in a lot heavier. What my general plan is, if it were to make it down that low, is I actually intend on using, I'd say probably the majority of the money I pulled out on my last profit on Bitcoin. So I'll load up. So I probably put in about, let's see, like maybe 12% on my first buy of the fiat that I cashed out on Bitcoin on around 13,000. So I'm in about 10-12% on that, and so the other 90% would go in heavier at the lows. And if it doesn't make it that low, and suddenly Doge just for whatever reason decides to just move up right now, I don't sweat it. I won't be in a full size position of what I would have liked to have bought at the lows, but that doesn't necessarily mean I won't be happy about the trade, right? Even if it's a partial size position at a higher price, instead of adding to the price up higher, bring my cost average up, I would just ride that position with a target around the 100 Satoshi mark. And I would just be happy with that as a trade, having used 12% of that capital on that trade to grow it. Obviously, if you take that 12%, say call it 29 Satoshis, and then let's say that goes up a bunch, you can certainly multiply that nicely. Suddenly end up with like over 30, basically everything I'd cashed out with that 12%. If it, let's say, just were to pop 2.5x or something like that, then that would be over 30% of increasing the entire amount. Just by risking 12% is increasing the entire stash by 30, right? So that'd be a pretty good risk reward for the amount that I put in. So it's kind of like a win-win. If it goes up, hey, I'm in a winning position. That's great. Just let it do its thing until it hits my targets. If it hits my targets, obviously nothing's guaranteed. And if it goes lower, then great. Then I have heavier orders. I'm going to buy more. Certainly, it'll be a position size that'll certainly be worth my while. If it does what I want it to do, then obviously that'll certainly be a nice little chunk of change. And then, like I said, some of that profit, I'll probably keep some of that profit in Bitcoin. So if that were to happen, what I would do is I'd cash out some of that into fiat, pull some out for taxes, and maybe keep some of the profit in fiat too myself. And then some of the profit I'd put into Bitcoin just to pad up and replace some of the Bitcoin that I sold my long-term stash. So basically just to kind of add to my long-term stash. So that's kind of how I'm playing Dogecoin right now, but it can be a slow cooker that tends to require patience. I didn't play these mid-range bounces. A lot of people were kind of playing this on social media, but my rule of thumb is I like to buy it under 30 Satoshis, and I'm just not as keen on the mid-range bounces. Obviously not as much of a percentage gain than buying it slightly lower, but obviously can still be very profitable. Okay, so that's Doge. We're going to go into Smart. So this is on Blue Exchange. Kind of looks like it's, I don't know what that liquidity is on this. Volume's a little bit weak, so it's a low cap, makes it riskier. Volume's a bit weak. Sometimes when I see a low cap with weak volume on a market that's been around for a while, like this has been around since the summer of 2017. Sometimes when I see that, there's risk of the market drying up, right? There's risks of, it's not on really any real major exchanges. HitBTC is the biggest exchange that's on. It's not a ton of volume. So sometimes when a market's been around this long, if it hasn't grown its volume over the past few years and the volume's been on the decline, and especially if it's a small cap, in my opinion, it's just a much, much riskier market. So one would have to position size. I don't know anything about the fundamentals on this project. So, but you can kind of see that it's the volume. I guess the volume hasn't been ever that great except for right here. I think the top volume was only like a few million. That was at the peak of the Parabola, 6.5 mil. So I think it's kind of, it looks like it's always kind of, the market cap, look, you can see the market cap. The market cap was a quarter, almost, actually at one point, the market cap was 1.1 billion at its peak. And suddenly that dried up to 12 million. So riskier play. If I were to buy a market like that, it would be a position size I would be comfortable in losing, right? And if I were to play it, it would be more of a trade setup versus a longer term hodl, right? I just get the biggest, when we say 90% of altcoins die or whatnot, the vast majority of that 90% is in the small caps, right? Like you don't see too many large caps dying off. You do see it from time to time, but for the most part, there's been a fair bit of consistency in the large caps, right? I mean, Ripple's been in the top for a long time. Litecoin, Ethereum, their volume has only been growing. The liquidity, the exchange distributions have been growing. It's on major exchanges. When I see a smaller cap with less volume on, shady exchanges, it just tells me there's not a ton of liquidity and it seems like a fading market to me. So makes it a bit riskier. Doesn't mean that it can't pump and doesn't mean that it can't rise on a bull cycle with other things. It just means that the probability of it dying is a lot higher, right? Obviously, there's other factors, but even active projects can get delisted and die. I think one example of that was, what was that example? TRST. Anybody remember that? That shitcoin, token. Look at that, 4,300. So this is a fading market, 2.4 million. Right, this got delisted. Right, just got TRX. TRST. This got delisted. And the delisting from Bittrex was kind of like the death of this market. Just when you thought it couldn't get worse, right? It drops 90%, then it drops another 90%, and then liquidity dries up. So, but is this project still active? Well, first thing you do is you check out the website. Website still active. Then you check out the forum. This is where you really figure out if it's active or not. Then go all the way back. I bet you a lot of people are crying and complaining. If this project is really dying, people say that they haven't heard from the developer in months or whatever. Reporting is still active. So people just kind of complaining about price and getting upset about it. Maybe the project is still active, but guess what? Even if they're developing their product or service, even if the devs are active, if the markets dry up and the liquidity dries up and it gets delisted and it's only pushing a little bit of volume, it shows that market participation has died in this, even if the project's still active. So, this is sure can certainly move up, but this is an example of a project that's still active, but because of delistings has been dying off, right? So that's kind of just another good example, something like that. So this is the type of thing. It's either your markets die, volume, liquidity dry up, and then the coins get delisted, or the developers just quit, and then that sometimes the network dies and you still have coins trading as zombie coins. XZC, see that one has kind of been making some moves in general. So seemed like it was kind of gaining a little bit, but looks like it's just kind of chopping around on the BTC charts. Not really, don't know if there's any. It could be, if I were to buy something, so this one is the one with Masternodes, Zcoin, I think, right? Yeah, Zcoin. I remember when this thing was over $100 a coin. Anyways, it's kind of grinding on this support breaks. That's probably going to make another level down. So again, what we need to see on the BTC charts is we need to see higher highs and higher lows, consistent higher highs and higher lows. Like this year on the BTC charts, we saw some fake outs, right? It looked like this was like a nice little accumulation range, and it was. Went to break out, big day, all exciting, goes up 130% in a day on the BTC charts. Obviously, that's not sustainable. Crashes and then traps, breaks support, and makes a new low. So now we're kind of in a new lower range. Personally, if I were hunting altcoins right now on the BTC charts to increase my Bitcoin, I'd be cutting out if they were breaking support, unless it's more of an accumulation play type of thing, longer term. But I would just be kind of careful. But it is low, right? It is a much lower end of the spectrum, which is a lot better than buying it up in the clouds. We just need to see altcoins decouple correlation-wise. This is actually one of the problems with altcoins is the barrier to entry. There's been too many projects, too many new projects created, too many crappy projects created, just an oversaturation, right? This is one of the strengths of Bitcoin being scarce, limited, 21 million. There's only Bitcoin is its social contracts kind of etched in that foundation. It's etched in those you can't change that social contract and say, oh, I'm going to suddenly change the supply to 30 million coins. No one's going to go for that, right? You obviously need consensus amongst miners, node operators, developers, participants, exchanges, companies, so on and so forth, the entire wider ecosystem, right? But altcoins are a dime a dozen. So they all compete with each other. You know, Bitcoin pretty much competes against all other altcoins. Just take every single altcoin, put them in a big basket, and they're all competing against Bitcoin, hence the market correlation and market dominance. But altcoins are not only just competing against Bitcoin, they're also competing against each other for market share. And, as new projects keep trickling in and other ones die or whatever, makes people cynical about alts. And then there's just too much dilution, right? There's only so much hype and so much liquidity to go around until you get a new wave of retail coming in. But I'll tell you something, as far as like institutional investors are concerned, they're probably going to go with the liquid assets. They're not going to be hunting some low cap shitcoins over on some sketchy exchange somewhere, right? They're likely going to go with the multi-billion-dollar market cap, liquid assets, stuff trading over $100 million, that kind of stuff. Or newer projects that have interest. So this is what I was talking about when I was looking for a sweet spot on a new project. I was like, okay, I want to invest and be an early adopter in a new project, but I don't want it to be a low cap. I don't want it to. I want them to have funding, and I want the project to be big enough that it's going to actually attract deeper pockets and institutional money. Now we're starting to see that trickle in with these banks and stuff coming into Tezos and using it. So I kind of, based on the fundamentals, I saw that possibility and planned accordingly type of thing. So that to me is kind of the sweet spot I'm looking at right now. I haven't seen a ton of action like the old days with small caps, like in the old days of 2017 and stuff. Everything was flying, everything was popping off because there was such a huge wave of new money that came in. Probably like 80% of the participants in crypto that exist today, probably 80% of them only joined after 2017, right? So that was like, before that, the ecosystem was a lot smaller. So it's when you had that massive rush of retail money and liquidity. You know what they say, new money coming into market is dumb money, right? So dumb money goes out and they buy any old garbage. They read some glossy white paper that some developers just copy and paste for some other stuff, some glitter on the website, and next thing you know, they're mortgaging their house to buy some shit coins, right? But people get burned, people wisen up, people get experience. They go through a bear trend, they get punished in the bear trend, they wisen up. But sometimes that could also lead people to be a little too risk adverse in that regards, or a little too, I guess you could say, cynical in that regards, right? And then sometimes there's an opportunity cost in being too cynical, too overtly cynical. As we've seen in the last cycle, Bitcoin from bottom to top went up 100x multiple, whereas most altcoins that have survived went up at least 1,000x multiple. So there is a huge opportunity cost. It's just about playing and timing it right. So I don't think we're at that point where we're never going to have an alt season again. Like people are saying, people are so fatalist with their, it's like, this binary all or nothing type of mentality. But I think a lot of it will be driven by retail investors. You're not going to get investment banks buying up a bunch of low cap, pumping a bunch of low cap shitcoins on some sketchy exchanges. It's probably just not going to happen, right? So right now, it seems to me that a lot of the money that's been coming into crypto as of this year seems like it's been a lot more institutional interest versus retail. You can kind of tell retail interest just on based on looking at Google Trends, because what do people do when they want to check something out, when they want to buy something, right? They look up, how do I buy a Bitcoin or altcoins or whatever. So if I were to just look up Bitcoin, I did notice there was an uptick, but still very much at the lower end of the spectrum. So past 12 months, let's just go with past 5 years. So you can kind of see there has been an uptick. So there is some retail coming in. It did kind of break out this lower range, right? A chart is a chart, right? So you can kind of see at the lows, user interest is fairly low. Then suddenly Bitcoin, notice how it peaked between June 23rd to 29th. Suddenly people are looking at Bitcoin after it went up above $10,000. Suddenly people are interested in it again, right? But this peak right here looks more like something that we saw in 2016 area, right? This is 2017, right? Let's just see. So I just kind of broke out of the range. So it hasn't gone like full parabolic, but there's that's good news. So there is more retail coming in. So that's kind of the cool thing with the whole supply and demand dynamics and being able to look at Google Trends. Let's look at altcoins. See if any interest in altcoins. Little spike, not as high. And I'm just going to look up alt season. It's pretty much like within a range. And of course it went. Isn't that funny how it went parabolic up here right around the peak? When altcoins were topping out, isn't that interesting? Think about that. Altcoins were topping out parabolic on the BTC charts around July, August, and then suddenly interest is peaking from retail right as alts are going parabolic. So you know what they say when grandma calls you up to buy Bitcoin, that's when you sell, right? So this is an example of retail coming in, interest peaking, and then that being a parabolic top. So we looked at that. We'll look at Zen, XRP, BAT, and then we're going to wrap it up. Zen. So that's like another reason why I'm in fewer projects. Another reason why I'm really not hardly in any lower cap markets. I mean, I've got tiny little bit of AGI as a low cap, but that's about it. I'm not really into that. And then after the Cryptopia got hacked and died, there's a whole ton of low caps that died. There's a whole ton of low caps that were such garbage that was the only exchange, bottom of the barrel, that they're trading on. And once that went, I just took out, just really cleaned up shop right there, right? That's good. We need to see more of that. People complain about that, but maybe one should reevaluate being in 100 different small cap coins. It's not necessarily, in my opinion, the smartest strategy at this point in the game, right? If you have clear confirmation of alt season and you see everything moving, then yeah, you could just trade whatever random tickers that are good price points and for quick flips back into BTC. So let me just see if there's a fib extension that where that would take me. So if we were to just run a quick fib extension downwards, you can see it kind of went to 0.38 zone. Again, this would need the BTC charts, this would need to break up above this so that prior support doesn't turn resistance, and then start to produce higher lows and higher highs. There were signs of that on a lot of alts, and then because Bitcoin went parabolic, it turned into a bit of a dead cat, right? So, I mean, risk to reward, buying it this low at the end of the spectrum, in my opinion, if I were hunting for alts, pretty good. Buying fairly low like this. They're up a lot higher in the USD charts, obviously, because we've been in a bull market and many of the ships have risen. Tides rise. So if I were to buy something like this, if this were to, let's say, break the bottom, it's like 20% till it cracks the local low. So, I would position size accordingly for that, with perhaps maybe taking a 20% hit if it cracked below support. That's one way of doing it. Another way is just position sizing, smaller size that one can just hold and ride it out. I think Zen was one of Horizon. I think perhaps they were 51% attacked. I know they're not the dominant algorithm. So I personally, I'm not the biggest fan of clone coins. It could be good for quick flips, but fundamentally, they're a lot weaker than the coins that are the dominant algo as far as hashing and stuff like that. Also, I think there's some regulatory risk around the masternode model, right? Obviously, regulators are taking an interest in privacy coins and they're aware of coin mixing, concern about money laundering, stuff like that. So that's an additional layer of risk with masternodes. That's one of the reasons why I went with like a staking model and chose something like Tezos, or let's say one chose something like Cosmos or something with just like a normal staking model versus making passive returns off of a mixing model. I think the risk profile in those two things is a lot higher if you're mixing coins than if you're just staking to secure the network. One could justify just securing the network, but if one were ever questioned, it would probably be difficult explaining why one is making profit off of mixing and obfuscating other people's dirty coins, right? So there is a risk with the masternode model. I actually started talking about that as early as 2017. Some of the risks with the masternode models and the coin mixing models. I think stuff like it should be kind of baked into the protocol, like zero proofs. So they're a lot better because you don't get that coin mixing and that taint by mixing in with dirty coins and stuff. But privacy is obviously very important because it increases fungibility, right? You want every unit to be the same and treated equally. All right, so so obviously, like not a ton of TA here, right? It's like it's been bleeding out. Looked like it was kind of recovering on the BTC charts and then kind of cracked below this line. So I would look for like a V bottom break above this, or if one were to try to take a stab, trying to knife catch a bottom, the lower end of the spectrum, then perhaps having a cutoff point and not necessarily bag holding it per se, unless you actually think the project is solid and you would like to hold that for the next cycle. All right, so ADA and then XRP and BAT. I think XRP is been really choppy market. It looks like it broke support. Honestly, I think at this point it looks like it's free fall. Wouldn't surprise me if it ended up all the way back in this gutter. Such a shame too when you think about it, right? Imagine the amount of Bitcoin one could have cashing out versus riding it all the way back down in full retrace. That's the thing with altcoins. You see altcoins are going parabolic. Cash them out because they're notorious for having full retracements. They are absolutely brutal that way. And we can see that, there's this kind of line up in between the 50% and 0.618 extension. So it wouldn't surprise me if it continued down since the support zone broke. This market doesn't seem terribly exciting to me right now. So Ripple has underperformed everything this year. In fact, I think Ripple was probably the crappiest market to be in this year. 77%. This market severely underperformed everything else. Bitcoin went up over 300. Tesla's hit 400. Litecoin hit over 500%. 77%. That's pretty pathetic, in my opinion. So sometimes I'll look for coins that kind of underperformed, to get in lower to get a better risk to reward. But thing with Ripple, though, on a fundamental note, they're selling tons of supply. Ripple Labs still owns 50% of the supply, and they sell massive chunks OTC every single month, right? So that's just selling pressure on the market. That's probably contributing to why it's underperforming. So I'm not a huge fan of this market right now for that reason, right? It wins thus far in 2019. It wins the prize as crappiest crypto market, aside from anything that's died and got delisted. BAT. All right. Looks like this wants to test the lower region of support again. We've got a lot of coins either testing support or broken support. So this to me is like a clear line in the sand. If it snaps this, then it's likely doing a full retrace back down to its original starting point. So that could be another 50-60% drop. So this area really has to hold up on the BTC charts. So that's pretty much all I have to say about that one. And it would have to kind of see if it would have to break this line. That would be the first sign. So the first sign is it had a bounce off of support. That's good. V bottom right up into this diagonal resistance, drop back down. If it can break up above this line, personally myself, if I want to buy this, I would need to see it start to break above this this line after bouncing off this support area. Otherwise, if I bought right now and it just keeps bleeding out, then could break down to the next level. So I would kind of treat this as a wait and see. And this market completely, I think this was like an ultimate trap. So you had this massive consolidation pattern. It's like this large ascending triangle, right? Look how much it's been consolidating. This is over a year of consolidating into this ascending triangle on the BTC charts, and it completely trapped bulls. This bull trap. I mean, this is kind of BS, right? 56% up. That's anyone who is taking a breakout trade on a ascending triangle like that likely would not have a 50% target, right? So I consider this a trap, because typically if you get a breakout on a large consolidation pattern like that, typically it'll make a fairly nice run, right? If you measure from here to here, it's like 500%. If we're to measure to here, be like 170%. So it didn't even quite tag the 1.618 zone. So nice V top. that's the thing too. If you're in a breakout trade and you see a V-topping like that, seller stepping in and starts bleeding out, then that's usually a sign just to close it, just to get out, maybe lock in a little bit of profit or whatnot. So I would just need to see this support hold more, and then to break this line to show that serious. Otherwise, not only did it break below this ascending triangle, it also trapped as well. So there's a possibility if it breaks the current support that it could further bleed out further. So I'll look at Zcash, answer a quick question, and then we're going to wrap it up soon. Zcash is kind of underperforming a bit too, although not as bad as Ripple. It at least almost made it up to a triple, right? Ripple didn't even make a double. But yeah, so I think I already looked at this. Like I said, this just needs to hold up. It needs to break this line. It needs to make higher low and higher high off of this area and break out. Question. I had noticed you'd bought a start position on ADA, then got out really, really quick. Any reason? Yeah, let's look at ADA. I'll explain my reason, and then that'll be it. So, I bought it with some fiat. So where was it? Basically, why I had closed it. There's a couple of reasons. It looked like it was producing a bit of a bear flag here, like a little bit of a bear pennant. So it was breaking down. I wanted to get out a graceful exit instead of waiting for my lower stop. I saw that it didn't look terribly strong on the BTC charts, right? And then I had decided, was a major drivers, I decided I want to focus on Dogecoin specifically, right? And just concentrate on one market, concentrate that capital on that one market to kind of simplify things. And so I cut out of ADA close to break even, pretty much because of this. It just looked like it was breaking down, and I was like, well, I might as well just save myself the 10% loss and just cut out at close to break even and just focus, keep that capital free. I felt like I kind of jumped the gun a little bit. I rushed that trade, forced a little bit. So it wasn't sitting with me. So I just decided to take a graceful exit on that. That'll change sometimes. Maybe it was like late at night. Maybe it's late at night. You take a trade, you sleep on it, you wake up, you're like, look at the chart. Don't really feel so great about that. And then obviously you're in control. You close it. You can open it whenever you want, close it whenever you want, position size however you want to. So I'm going to focus my energy on Dogecoin for this midterm play, right? Do you feel Doge will be the same as 2017? I don't think Doge is going to break the same USD highs that it did, obviously because everything was parabolic. But what's interesting about Doge, where is this? Let's try to find an exchange that has more data. Okay, this has a lot of data. So obviously you can see this was 2017 parabolic. If Doge makes it up to 100 Satoshis, it's more than likely not going to look like this. But right now in the USD charts, what I like about Doge right now, though, is that's creating an ascending triangle in the USD charts, and it's in my ideal buy zone that typically only happens like every few years where it makes it down to that level, right? So the last time I made it down to that level was 2017. The last time I traded Doge was 2017. So just following my own rules, I see it go down to that level. I have to be a buyer, but obviously I saved the majority of my ammunition as a hedge to buy and lower. So if this were to ramp and break up to 100 Satoshis, then, dollar wise, maybe end up coming up to this zone right here. Dollar wise, maybe that turns into, I don't know, it's hard to tell. It's hard to like try to figure out and map out how it would correlate and respond on the USD charts, right? So it could certainly go up higher, but on the BTC charts, if it hit the 100 Satoshi mark, I'm looking at a triple or quadruple on the BTC charts. If Bitcoin stays stable or stays higher on the higher end of the spectrum, then yeah, it can certainly shoot up higher than a double. So it's certainly a possibility. You never know, right? It could look parabolic if that were to happen, but it's hard to figure out what the USD price would be by matching it on the BTC charts, right? Because it's all dependent on what Bitcoin's doing. So there's a lot of moving parts in that equation. But really, I'm doing this as a play to not only lock in some profit and to compound the recent gains that I'd locked in, but also just to pad up my Bitcoin holdings again. And I find Doge tends to be fairly good for doing that. At least it has in the past. But what we do know, Doge, is that it does tend to be very cyclical, right? We've just seen it have this cycle many times. So we'll see how that plays out. Could take a while. So we'll end it there. It's been over an hour. Again, happy 4th of July for anyone who's celebrating. And I will see some of you in Amsterdam next week. So I'm looking forward to that. Should be a blast. Take care. Have a good weekend. See what the week has in store for us. If anything major happens, if anything changes, then I'll update things on watch list or trade alerts. So take care, folks. All right. All right, folks. I'll see you all in the trenches. Cheers.
Свършва.